Hey guys, Rybaack here, and welcome to the third tank guide from your main tank and shuttle bus riders. And this third tank is going to be the total opposite of the second one. Instead of being the most complicated tank, it's going to be the absolute easiest tank. The Guardian Druid, the bear, the growling fucking monster that will crush bones and just not ever take damage. Very simple to play, very simple to grasp, and actually very simple to master. So this one may not be as long as the other five, because it's going to be very simple. Of course, going over the basics of once again, don't get hit in the back, make sure you have the most threat if you're supposed to be tanking at that moment, whether it's Mythic Plus or Raids, yada yada yada. That's gonna be the basics, of course, for all 6 tanks. And about Bear, they're pretty much the big health pool. They're supposed to have the most amount of natural health. Natural meaning without buffs, without cooldowns, without anything like that. They're pretty much the big bag of health. They're the meat shield. They're pretty much the physical wall, but damage is not very good, even when you're running its damage build. So obviously, let's get back into it and go over the talents first. Okay, let's go over the talents. This part will not be as long as the other ones because they are quite simple with little explanation needed, as the Guardian Druid is again the simplest tank. For the first line, Bristling Fur for survivability. You get rage based on damage, and you need rage when you're taking a crap ton of damage, so that you can keep your Iron Fur up. Maybe use some of the defensives that you might need here and there. Blood Frenzy's good is for the damage build, because Thrash is your pretty much spam build. It's pretty much your spam ability. Like, whenever you get the chance to use it, you just use it. It's your AoE, like, swipe. And you get rage based on it. So you can generate rage by just AoE like crazy. So this is good for the AoE. This is good for the survivability. Brambles is only okay. This is not really much of anything. So, for damage, Blood Frenzy. For survivability, Bristling Fur. Second line, only one option here, Guttural Roars. Why? Your Stampede Roar is one of the strongest utilities in the game. You have your Stampede Roar. It lets out the roar, increasing the movement speed of all friendly players within 30 yards by 60% for 8 seconds. Without this talent, it's a much shorter range, and it becomes a 2-minute cooldown if you don't take it. You really need this for specific fights. The Intimidating Roar could be used for some situations, like Mythic Plus or maybe the Mage Tower. But if you're doing like raiding, Guttural Roars is the only option here. For the third line, it's either Balance or Restoration. Do you want damage, or do you want to live? If you want to live, Restoration. If you want to do damage, Balance Affinity. Because bears also interact a little bit with Moonfire a little bit, depending on whether you take like Galactic Guardian or not. Because they have like no benefits when you're going from Feral form to Moonkin form. And bears actually interact more with the Moonfire and Sunfire and stuff like that, as these are basic spells that every druid can get, whereas you actually have to be a cat to use some of these other ones. But if you want to stay alive, if you're going for survivability, you'll want Restoration Affinity, mostly because of Ysera's Gift, and maybe a couple spells you do like pre-pull. Especially if you don't have a Resto Druid in your raid team, you'll want it because, let's say you're prepping for the pull. Let's say this dude's the boss.
I stand with you.
Shut the hell up. What you want to do before pull, especially if you don't have a Druid, you want to put somebody's hot on yourself. If you have a Druid, you could let them do it if you want, but it's just so you'll get a little bit of healing on yourself. That's pretty much it. You don't really need to use Swift Men because it's not a hot and it just doesn't do anything. But that's pretty much it for that. With the Resto Affinity, the Ysera's Gift gives you healing just by living. Every few seconds you'll receive like 1.5% of healing. But that can get stronger depending on your legendary setup. So that's why you want to run the Resto Affinity. The level 60 line, purely situational, based on the fight. Not so much for Mighty Bash. You don't really want Mighty Bash in a raid, but the other two are situational. Mass Entanglement could be used in fights like Agrimar, Covenant Shavara, stuff like that. Typhoon does have its situations, but it's not a general purpose talent. You would only take it for if you feel that is the way you want to go with Agrimar, especially if you're doing a higher Agrimar like Heroic to Mythic. So one of these two, depending on the fight and how you prefer to do your part of the job. The next line, it's pretty simple. I only have Soul to Forest comboed because of the legendaries I have. If I had it my way, I'd have a different legendary setup. But if you want to go damage, Galactic Guardian for the Moonfire again. This synergizes with the Balance Affinity, so because when you're running it, you'll trigger an automatic Moonfire, which your Balance Affinity can benefit from. But if you're looking to survive, Incarnation, Guardian Versock, easy pick, because you get 15% armor, and armor is your strongest stat. And especially when you use the Incarnation, you get limitless melee use. Your Mangle basically has no cooldown, your Swipe has no cooldown, your Thrash has no cooldown, your Taunt has no cooldown. Pretty much all of your attacks, your Taunt. This could be used for DPS as well, but if you're going to be using the Balance Affinity, you need Galactic Guardian. The only way you could use Incarnation and DPS is if you're running Feral Affinity. If you're running that, Incarnation can still work. I use it for the armor and limitless taunts and stuff. But if you're running Galactic Guardian, you need Balance Affinity. You literally cannot combo Galactic Guardian with Feral Affinity at all. Same with Resto to Galactic Guardian. You just can't do it. It's either Balance and Galactic, or one of these two in Incarnation. The level 90 line, I'd pick Guardian of Elune, because when you use Mangle, which is something that you would use when your Thrash is on cooldown, it increases the duration of your Iron Fur by 2 seconds, or the healing of your next Frenzy Regeneration. So it either makes this stronger, or this lasts longer. Both survivability abilities. I use this for a survival type thing, although all three of these could be used for some sort of survivability. This is not a DPS line at all. Some people go with survival of the fittest to get their faster survival instincts. I haven't really experimented with it, but it doesn't serve me as well as having longer Iron Furs or stronger Frenzy Regenerations. The last line, Rended Terror for AoE, and for AoE multi-target and really damage. Pulverize for single target, because it does a decent amount of damage and gives you 9% reduced damage taken for 20 seconds. That's a lot of time. You can have 100% uptime in a pure single target fight with this if you do it right. Rend and Tear makes your Thrash better by per stack, decrease in damage taken by up to 6% per target. If you're in a heavy AoE fight, this would probably be your winner. But if it's a pure single target, like let's say Iminar, you'll want Pulverize. Lunar Beam is just a no-go because all it is a beam of lunar light doing like 500k damage and healing you for like 1.2 million over 8 seconds. That dot's not that great, and it's way too long of a cooldown. So I'd go for Pulverize or Rend and Tear. Now let's go over the stat priority. Okay, for stat priority, my current stat weights are not correct. So don't feel the need to pause and copy and paste all this, because my stat weights are not even set up correctly, because I've mostly been gearing up this tune. Because I have the wrong legendaries on and everything, and I'm trying to get the proper ones. But for the stat priorities, you really want armor, which could be considered a way of saying item level. You really want armor as that's your superior way of mitigation. Because one thing that druids have as a weakness is magic mitigation. They're not good magic defenders at all. If it's a magic heavy fight, that's probably one of the last tanks you want, even though they have the Stampeding Roar. If their Stampeding Roar is needed for the fight, then you can take them, but if not, it's like kind of pointless. So you really want armor and then stamina, because, well, you're a big bag of health. Especially since you don't have that much magic defense, you need the big bag of health to be able to soak up the damage. Because if something's gonna hit for 7 million, that bear druid should be able to soak that 7 million hit. He'll be pretty hurt, but he'll live, where other tanks may not. So that's why you want the stamina. You want versatility as a main secondary stat, as that is a mitigation stat. So what it'll do is, for everybody, it increases damage and healing done by your versatility percent, and it decreases damage taken by half of your versatility percent. You also want mastery. Mastery is your second behind versatility, because that gives you health and healing received. It increases your maximum health and healing received by your mastery's percent. And it also increases your attack power by double your mastery percent. So that's why mastery is important. Haste would then be next, because it would give you attack speed, energy regeneration, if you were running feral, the energy part matters. Spellcasting speed, stuff like that, so that you could swing your claws faster. Crit would actually be last, because especially if you're running the survival build, you really don't need crit. Because one thing about bear is, even if you have a bunch of crit and you just start critting your attacks a lot, the damage is super underwhelming in single target. In AoE, it's kind of there, kinda. Especially if you have the loofah wrappings and stuff. But unless you're running the damage legendaries as well, which I happen to not have, running a damage build is entirely pointless. You need those loofah wrappings, for example. And then the last one's agility, because, well, what are you gonna do with dodge chance? You're a big bag of health. You're a big ass bear. So that's pretty much the stat priority. Now let's go over trinkets before we leave this page right here. For trinkets, you really want to be running stuff that's kind of mitigation. For example, the Apocalypse Drive is really good because it gives haste, which you could use some haste. Because as you can see, Apocalypse Drive at a 945 heroic item level, for the next 10 melee attacks you take are reduced by up to 1.1 million each, which is actually kind of a lot. Whether you can use this on pull, you can use this when you're tanking. It pretty much helps you not die during that 20 seconds. So that's really crucial. The Dark Moon deck is also really, really, really strong, because armor. Because whatever gives you armor is really, really strong. And I'm running the Smoldering Titan Guard because this gives mastery, which this extra mastery gives you extra health, it gives you extra healing received, and also the indestructible wall that the trinket triggers when you use it is just absolutely busted. It's one of the better trinkets for multiple tanks. Like, especially the ones that really use mastery. So this trinket's really good. But again, Apocalypse Drive, Smoldering Titan Guard, Archimonde's Hatred Reborn, Dark Moon deck, ones like that are really, really strong. Damage trinkets are pretty pointless, really, because as a bear, your biggest two weaknesses are damage output and magic defense. Those are your two weaknesses. Now let's go over Legendaries. Let's go over all the Legendaries real quick. So this first one, which so happened to be the very first one I got, that is the helmet. It gives the best stats, versatility, mastery, and what it does is when you use your bark skin is a 20% defensive, and it's also usable while you're stunned, frozen, incapacitated, feared, or asleep. It's really good because it's one of the abilities you can use when you're pretty much CC'd. Same with bristling fur. These two abilities are still usable regardless. So when you use bark skin with this legendary, you get 75 rage. 45 of it is instant, and then the other 30 is over 3 seconds. So you get up to 75 rage when you use bark skin, which is a free iron fur comboed with it. It's strong, but it is not your absolute best in slot. If it's one of your first, and if you don't have your best in slots, but you have this, I can recommend it as a go-to. Pride as not that great. Again, you're a tank. Pride as is really bad for tanks because even though it does give a decently strong shield, and even as a guardian druid, it's a bigger shield than the other 5. Unless you're like a fucking blood DK who uses vampiric blood. See, the stats are only okay. It has to haste and mastery, but it gives a lot of crit. You don't really want a lot of crit. And even though it's a bigger shield than most of the other tanks, it still has very low uptime. Fury of Nature. While you're in bear form, you deal 30% increase in nature and arcane damage, and you're healed for 30% of that damage done. This is not that great because the crit and the mastery's low, and you don't really need the extra damage. And even if you're going for a damage field, there just is not enough output. This legendary, this is what you want. Even though it has the crit, it has some haste too, and it has a lot of mastery, and it also gives a decent amount of armor. It pretty much makes your affinity effect stronger, and if you're going for survivability, it makes your Ysterious gift stronger. So you're getting more natural healing just by breathing oxygen, pretty much. It makes your 1.5% healing every 5 seconds turn into, I believe, 2%. Possibly. Or 2.25. I haven't done the math, but it becomes very strong. So this is one of your go-to. This is your main go-to if you're running pure survivability. The loofah wrappings. Crit haste, so okay stats, but the equip effect increases the damage and radius of thrash by 25%. This is pretty much a copy-paste. Wait, no. This is a copy-paste of the Keg Smash shoulders, pretty much. If you remember the Keg Smash shoulders, other than the fact that you still only have one charge, it basically is the same shit. Your thrash reaches farther and does more damage. If you're looking for Mage Tower, this is the go-to. If you're looking for damage build, this is the go-to. If anything damage related or Mage Tower related, this is a must. Synodarian the Symbiote, this is only okay. It's basically okay. I know how to explain this now. I know how to explain this in comparison. It's pretty much Firestarter for a fire mage. Because it does extra damage to enemies above 90% health. Except you don't get healed as a fire mage. But it's pretty much a Firestarter type effect that you'd be getting on your druid. This is only okay if you're going for damage again. But even in the damage build, you would rather have the loofah wrappings or this. The stats are okay. The crit's a bit unnecessary in my opinion, but could be used. Again, going for the damage build, this can work because Thrash can stack up to 2 more times. So instead of it capping out at 3 stacks of Thrash per target, it stacks up to 5 stacks per target, which is actually pretty insane. If you're using Pulverize like I am, you can use Pulverize like a lot. Or Rend and Tear, which if you're in a multi-target situation, you'd be running Rend and Tear instead. which Rend and Tear becomes even stronger with this legendary. So it could be survivability too. So far you've seen 3 best in slots. You've seen the best survivability one, you've seen the best AoE damage one, and you've seen the other damage one. Skysex Hold has best stats, versatility, mastery. Frenzy Regeneration heals you for an additional 12% of your maximum health over 3 seconds. So it makes your Frenzy Regeneration stronger, which is pretty good. It's not a best in slot, but it's decent. It's something worth using. So if you get this, if it's one of your first legendaries, it's worth it. The crafted legendary, just like the Brewmaster Monk, this one's not that great. Don't even consider it. Like if you don't even have a legendary, go grab the Insignia of the Grand Army instead. This is just not worth it. Sephuz, not that. This is actually pretty bad too. It's even worse for the bear than it is the monk, because I could at least find use on the Brewmaster Monk, not on the Guardian Druid. There's way too much crit. They should just swap out how much of what stat gives the much. If that 3800 was the haste instead, it'd be better. And it pretty much impacts haste, which you don't really need that, because you're not going to interrupt or dispel like at all. Well, you might interrupt here and there, but you're not going to dispel like at all. This is a pretty crap legendary. The Dual Determination. This is one of your best in slot survivabilities as well. The crit's a bit unnecessary, but the mastery's great. It has a socket, and you get a third charge of survival instincts, and they recharge 15% faster. This is actually really, really good because survival instincts is your emergency defensive. For me, it reduces all damage I take by 66% for 6 seconds. Imagine if I had 3 charges and it recharged faster than 4 minutes. Which I think it's like 3.5 or 3 minutes. I haven't done the math yet. This is really, really powerful actually. So if you get this and you're looking to stay alive, this is one of the legendaries to go to. Soul the Arc Druid. It's okay for like one of your first legendaries just to get the item level. And Soul the Forest, which is the only talent that you get regardless of spec. See, Druid's kind of weird with their class ring. They only get 1 talent that they can use throughout all 4 specs. It's not like Guardian gets this one, Resto gets this one. They all get the same talent. I don't even know how it works in the other 3 specs. It could be the same. In Bear, it's okay, but it's not a best in slot at all. Insignia of the Grand Army. There's not really a whole lot of artifact traits that you're going to be going for, so this one may not be as strong. But again, if it's like your first legendary, it's good for the item level. It's good for a little bit of extra stats. It's okay, usable, but not a best in slot. This is a best in slot for survivability too. It has best stats, and it's pretty much a stronger Pride as, where you get the shield, but it also does damage too. This is good because with Pride as, it's pretty much just a stat stick with a shield. You would actually want this because the shield is a lot more powerful. Way more powerful. Oh, thank you. Huh, thank you, sir. Anyways, Amethyll's Vision. This actually could be pretty useful for the tanks. It has all the secondary stats. Your spells and abilities have a chance to grant you 2200 of the 3 random stats, which is like capped out avoidance, a lot of speed, a shit ton of leech. When empowered by the Pantheon, your agility is increased by 6700, so the Pantheon effect is only okay. It would be really strong on the Brewmaster Monk, but not so much the Guardian Druid. if you were going for the Pantheon effect, Agrimar's Conviction would be a little bit better. Cause that gives you extra versatility and stuff instead. So for damage, you want Lufa and the Encasement. For survivability, you want the chest, always, and then the choice of either Dual Determination or Argamond. Really personal preference on these two, but the chest is a must if you want to stay alive. It's a must. And now for the very short part that has like nothing to it at all, rotation. So the rotation is not really exactly existent. See, the Brewmaster Monk actually had a rotation. This spec doesn't really. It's pretty much just sustaining and just maintaining, kind of like the Blood TK. It doesn't even really have an opener either, unless you were running the legendaries that I have. Like having the Barkskin helmet kinda creates an opener, but the other ones don't really. So because I'm running this legendary because of what my legendary setup is, because of what I have, my opener goes like this. I'll taunt the enemy, and then I'll go in with an instant Barkskin, and then Thrash, and then I'll use Mangle, and then Swipe, and then Thrash will come back, and I'm doing all this while I'm keeping Ironfur up. When Mangle procs, you hit it. So it's pretty much Thrash takes priority over everything. When it comes off cooldown and is ready to use, you use it immediately. And then you press whatever else you have, whether it's to Pulverize when you have at least 2 stacks of Thrash, or you press Mangle to do some damage, or Swipe to do some damage. It's pretty much hit either of these two and maybe this while waiting for this. But always prioritize Thrash first if you can, especially if you're in a multi-target situation and you need to incarnate. I'll sometimes say I'm reincarnating for some reason, so I'll use it, and then in an AoE situation, I'll just spam Thrash because it's so much simpler to do. If you're having trouble getting threat, this is loud. Hold on. Okay. If you're having trouble getting threat from the boss, you can incarnate because you can spam your taunt. Like I just taunted 4 times right there. So that's where incarnation would be used, is either for extra AoE damage if it's necessary, or if you're having trouble getting threat from your other tank. And either of those two situations. So that's pretty much it, really, because the Bear Druid's just that simple. There's really not too many ways to go with it. It doesn't have a lot of variety like some of the other tanks might have. And from the poll that I made on the Brewmaster video, the 4th tank that's going to be seen is the Prot Warrior. And the Prot Warrior, it's fun, but it's not so effective. And it also has lack of variety, as it only has 2 builds, the Devastator or the Indomitable. But I'll get to the Prot Warrior later. This concludes the Guardian Druid video, as bears are just way simple. There's like nothing to them. It was the easiest one to learn out of all 6. It took like no time at all. So there you go. That concludes the Guardian Druid guide. Number 4 will be the Protection Warrior. Hopefully you're looking forward to that, as it's fun. Very fun class to play. That is it. This is Rybaack signing off. Have a good one.